Hey, up right, here we go, the full review of the Honda CL500. Just over a month's riding and just over 500 miles on the engine. As you know, this is my bike. I actually bought this bike after a 1 week loan of a demonstrator I had Miles King Sport in Hull. And I actually bought the CL500 in due to an overwhelming number of requests from viewers to see that bike on this channel. It has actually been the most requested bike in comments on various videos over the last couple of years. This isn't a first impressions video. As you know, I don't do them, they're pointless. I like to put at least 400 miles on a bike before I'm prepared to review it. Nor will it be a review that's rich in specifications that you can easily just drag off the online brochure on the internet. This bike will be a long-term channel bike, so in that respect this is a review of ownership of the bike and what you can expect from it if you decide to live with one. Now, as you know, I have about a 15-mile test course that I run these bikes on, whether it be a press bike or a bike of my own, in order to assess how the bike reacts in different situations. We've also done some pillion work and some motorway work. I think I've got a really good idea of how this bike behaves now. I think we live in some really interesting times now. Honda, Suzuki, Yamaha and even Kawasaki is returning back to the ethos of the universal Japanese motorcycle. A phrase that was coined by the motorcycling press back in the 1970s, and that is just a dependable, reliable, reasonably performing all-rounder that does everything well. In essence, a traditional roadster that has enough power to frighten you if you're too heavy with your right wrist. It'll get you to work Monday to Friday. It'll get you out with your mates on a weekend, and it will even lend its hand to a bit of touring if that's what you want to do. That's exactly what the CL500 is, and of course we've recently seen the introduction of the Honda CB1000F and the long-awaited Honda 400 Super 4, which is shortly to be available on the Japanese market, with whispers that versions of this platform may in the future be available in other geographical locations. I think a 56 horsepower reiteration of legendary Honda 404 would do very well, especially in the UK. Right, let's talk about the engine braking process. This is a very important part of motorcycle ownership, for a new motorcycle anyway. Often quite a difficult time for some owners. You know, myself, after owning Indian motorcycles for the last 7 years or so, with the inexorable 1200 mile braking period, both with the CL500 and my beloved GB350S, the superior manufacturing quality and expertise of Honda make the braking period a breath of fresh air. For the first 300 miles, the handbook reads words to this effect: avoid full throttle operation while the engine is cold, avoid rapid down changes, drive conservatively for the first 300 miles. That's it. So for your average mechanically sympathetic owner, you can ride it as normal from the word go. None of that tedious having to ride around at speeds that means you frequently get overtaken by bicycles for the first 500 miles and can't keep up with traffic from 500 miles to 1200 miles. This 471cc twin liquid cooled motor has an excellent reputation, with some reports stating that it can easily do 100,000 miles with just normal servicing and routine maintenance. My bike Bumblebee has run flawlessly in the first 500 miles. The gearbox has been an absolute delight. It does feel a little bit clunky to start with, but I've never had a missed gear or a false neutral once while I've been running it in. It's been clinically precise from the word go. Now, I've heard one or two people complain about the Dunlop tyres and the brakes on this bike. I've got to admit, initially I wasn't over impressed either. The tyres took a couple of 100 miles to scrub in properly. And actually, I'm quite impressed by them now. I will get on to tests of what they can cope with in a few minutes. They provide excellent grip on wet or dry roads, and I describe them as confidence-inspiring on twists and turns and fast roundabouts. Now, I'm not the kind of rider that depends heavily on my brakes. That's the way I was taught to ride. So it was about 300 miles before I'd sort of bedded the brakes in well enough to realise that actually they're pretty decent. They do feel a bit soft and weak initially, but once the pads have mated properly with the discs, no issues whatsoever. I consider them to be quite decent brakes. Now, there's no doubt in my mind that the engine on Bumblebee was a little bit tight compared to the test bike that I'd ridden the week previously, which had several thousand miles on it. The test bike was quite happy to trundle along in 6th gear at 30 miles an hour. Bumblebee's engine was considerably tighter. To me, it didn't seem entirely happy at 40 miles an hour in 6th gear, nor did it feel happy at 30 miles an hour in 5th gear. So I followed my normal sort of braking in habits of just hanging on to gears for a little bit longer. 4th gear at 30 miles an hour, changing into 5th at about 35, hanging on to 5th until I reach about 45 miles an hour before clicking up into 6th. This just takes the strain off the engine, gives it an easy time, and sort of deletes the possibility of piston slap, which I didn't encounter. I just felt at times like it was perhaps on the verge of that. By the time I'd hit 300 miles, I started riding the bike normally, and it's been sweet as a nut. On top of that, I didn't exceed 60 to 65 miles an hour for the first 300 miles. Now, compared to the original test bike that I rode, it's obvious that Honda have made some changes to this model. First of all, the clocks. There's been a lot of complaints in the past that the clocks were too dim and contrast wasn't good enough, which in some lighting conditions makes them hard to read. Honda have reconfigured the instrument panel. I mean, it looks exactly the same, but it's much brighter. Contrast is better. I've never had any difficulties reading any information from the instrument panel in any lighting conditions. That's a thing of the past. Also, fueling on the early models was a bit glitchy. Yeah, I've got to admit, I was a little bit disappointed with the way the test bike ran at low speeds on, mini roundabouts, that kind of thing. It was a bit of a handful, especially when the engine was cold. I'm glad to report that Honda have sorted this out to a large degree. It's still not perfect, but it's about what we expect from modern bikes that are hindered by, the draconian emissions controls. I also found the seat more comfortable on my new bike compared to the test bike. Now, I'm still uncertain as to whether, the test bike having a few thousand miles on it, maybe the seat had compressed, or whether Honda have made some alterations to the padding to make it more comfortable. But the new seat is definitely more comfortable. Now, I am swapping and changing between this seat and the taller seat at the moment, and they'll have their own video in due course. Fit and finish is perfect, as you would expect from a premium motorcycle from Honda, despite its low price tag. And one pleasant surprise was that the mirrors are actually pretty decent. I've got a good view on both sides. So if you just want to buy a bike and ride it without messing around with it, there's no need to worry about the mirrors. They're pretty much perfect as far as modern motorcycles go. As part of my normal review process, I took this bike out on my usual 15-mile Stone Creek test circuit. These are particularly gnarly, bumpy roads, mainly single track, or just a little bit more than single track roads, with lots of twists and turns, lots of gravel on the road, lots of potholes, and the Chasms of Doom. They're basically very poorly maintained farm tracks. And Bumblebee particularly enjoys these roads for breakfast. Now, the front suspension is not adjustable. The rear suspension is adjustable for preload only. I think with 5 positions. Don't quote me on that, I might be wrong. When I received the bike, it was set up on preload position 2, which I personally found a little bit harsh, so I dropped it down to position 1. The softest setting. Now, I've had reviewers in the past say that the suspension is a little bit bouncy. Personally, I don't find it bouncy, although it does sometimes feel a little bit floaty. Bearing in mind, as I say, I've got it on minimum rear preload. Now, this is uber comfortable, really nice soft ride, but still gives you enough feedback for the most part from the road. Certainly no bad behaviour set up like this. With my weight on it in 516 miles, it's never bottomed out once. It doesn't wallow on long sweeping bends, which I sort of thought it might do, but it doesn't. And on the whole, I found it to be very comfortable and civilised. The soft setting hasn't compromised the handling, although, you know, some people might prefer to tighten it up a little bit. Right, now for the Chasms of Doom test. These are basically single track roads that have been wrecked by farm machinery and HGVs. The road has basically broken up and collapsed at either side. These present a major stability and handling hazard for most bikes. None of the Royal Enfields have negotiated it safely. In fact, the classic 650 tried to kill me. Triumphs and even the BMW GS Adventure struggle on this bit of road. In fact, the only Indian bike that's ever fared well on these roads has been the Bantam 350. The Hondas seem to just take it in the stride. But the CL500, with its combination of tyres and suspension, has actually performed better than most of the Hondas I've taken on here in the past. It just lapped it up. Now, obviously, any sensible rider would just avoid these ruts and stick to the flat bits. I don't do that. What I do as part of this test is I purposely run the bike into those Chasms of Doom as fast as my nerve will allow me to see if I can get it to misbehave. The CL500 doesn't misbehave, it just tiptoes over it. In fact, on this circuit, which, you know, it has plenty of really nasty bits of road like this, it became a bit of a challenge for me, really, just to find something that the CL couldn't do. And, you know, I just didn't find its limits. You know, I can't extend to you enough just how bad these roads are. They are horrible. I won't even take my own car down here. But from my perspective, these type of roads are exactly the sort of terrain or natural habitat that the CL500 was designed for. The faster you go, the more she likes it. Now, even from the stabilised footage here, you can see that the bike is bouncing up and down, but it's hitting potholes and imperfections that are up to 6 inches deep. Now, riding high-speed motorway work, etc. I've got to admit, I don't have any footage of this. I've done a total of 60 miles on the motorway to York and back. I think one of the features of this bike is that most of the time I simply didn't want to take a camera out with me because I was enjoying the bike so much. And I have to keep reminding myself that this bike is only 471 cc's. And I say that because the performance is, you know, way beyond what I expected from it. You know, I've been riding the Indian 650s for the last 7 years. I think perhaps the Gold Star has a slight edge on performance, especially when it comes to acceleration, but it's far more exciting and satisfying to ride than my Interceptor ever was. It's not a bike that requires constant gear changing to get good performance out of it. As long as you're doing around about 40 miles an hour, you can leave it in top gear and just wound the throttle back for an easy, safe overtake. It's a really nice, satisfying bike to ride. No problems with hills, and as I say, motorway work was a breeze. It's at home on the motorway. It's got a slightly longer wheelbase than, let's say, the GB350, which means it's very stable. The suspension on those sort of roads is luxurious, and its top end performance way exceeds anything that you're going to need on a motorway. I mean, I don't really like riding any bike on a motorway. That's not what bikes are for, but you know, we have to do it occasionally. I found it quite relaxing, nice seating position. The air hitting you is clean air. There's, you know, no turbulence or anything like that. Nothing to report really that's untoward about it on a motorway. It's a good motorway bike as bikes go. I know people have complained about, you know, wind issue on bikes like this, on a naked bike, that it needs a screen. I personally, I don't see that. Do your planks on a regular basis. It'll strengthen your neck muscles up, it'll strengthen your upper body and your core muscles, and you won't even notice the wind. The longest ride that I've done all in one go was just over 100 miles. I was starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable towards the end of it, but there were no aches or pains the following day. Right, fuel consumption. I've had a look at the forums. A lot of people are saying that 88 is the norm. Some people are saying they're getting over 100 miles to the gallon out of it. I don't dispute any of that. You know, I've just been riding the bike normally. I've also been exploring its performance for this review. The best that I've got out of it so far is an average of 85 miles to the gallon, but when you get out at motorway speeds, that drops down to the high 70s, 78, 79 miles to the gallon. The bike doesn't have a huge fuel tank, but I think you're looking at about 200 miles, give or take 10 miles in between fill-ups. Now, pillion work, it is a decent passenger carrier. You are a little bit limited for seat space. The seat is about 2 inches shorter than your average motorcycle dual seat, but it is usable. I'm not going to do a full report on that here. I'm going to save that for a completely separate video where hopefully Paula can join in and give her thoughts. But I do think that couples who are perhaps physically very large might have to cross this bike out from the list of possible long distance two-up tourers. The Honda CL500 is just, you know, a thoroughly charming, easy to live with, do anything motorcycle. You know, once it equips it with a bit of luggage, and luggage is not an issue for this bike. I've been using it for doing all the errands, shopping, stuff like that. It's just such a convenient, friendly, easy bike. That's you know, the best way to describe it. It's not a physically large bike. It's just like a loyal, friendly little puppy that's just eager to please you and do whatever you need it to do. It'll commute, it'll tour, and it will equally show a clean pair of heels if you're having a hooligan day. It's a genuine return to the concept of a universal Japanese motorcycle. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so, you know, helping to support this channel. I do appreciate it. Leave a like, hype this video, and become a subscriber if you're not already subscribed. I will, of course, be back on Friday, so until then, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.